Hola y bienvenidos al Palante Nonprofits Podcast. Soy su host, Dr. Andrea Ortega, trabajando con organizaciones sin fines de lucro en Estados Unidos. I'm so excited to highlight our nonprofit leaders, change makers, and other philanthropists in our sector. Bienvenidos.
Hello, everybody. Bienvenidos and welcome to Palante Nonprofits. Today we're talking about, oh my God, this buzzword, impact. And it's not just a buzzword, but there is a way to show it as work that you can prove. The Merriam-Webster defines impact as a power or major influence or effect. And in our sector, right, the nonprofit sector, that can get, I love the word fuzzy really fast. And I say fuzzy because if you are using ChatGPT and tools like that, there's a lot of fluff, a lot of fuzz, and you want to make sure as you continue, the word impact applies to your funding, your grants, your applications, your messaging with people. And so for me, man, this is a conversation I've been wanting to have for a long time. And I got the chance to meet Tayah through a connection in Alpha convention this year, earlier in July. And oh my God, we totally hit it off. But at some point, we got to talking about the word impact and how it's utilized in different experiences we've had, because she also has higher ed experience and instructional design. So in all of that, we're like, man, people use the word impact so interchangeably to so many things. And at the end of the day, it's really used as a fuzzy word unless you actually get down to defining what that means for your organization. And so I invited Tayah Butler, who has an MBA. She's a fierce ally and leader and spent 18 years driving change in higher education. When politics tried to shrink the work, she walked away and brought her receipts with her, from inclusive career fair interventions to curriculum design and belonging metrics. Tayah turns values into measurable outcome. And I think that was the inspiration, Tayah, right, for this conversation.
Absolutely was. Like, how do we
Yeah.
really get serious about these impacts?
Yeah, and I want to highlight, I think you might be one of my small allies that I invite on here, but I've seen you. I'm very careful about allies because people can post and say they are, but their actions don't reflect that. And I just want to say everything I've seen you do in your past and even in your current career, like I wouldn't have had you on if I didn't believe that otherwise, because it's really actions and the way we show up for not just Hispanics, for everybody across different sectors is and different backgrounds and different experiences. Because I think it's, being an ally is not just about race or ethnicity. It's about different life experiences, different socioeconomic, different. And I've seen your work and I gotten the chance to know you over the past couple of months. And I think that, if anybody's listening, when we bring allies, we really mean it. It has to be actionable, which I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about today.
I sure appreciate that. Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate it a lot. I mean, that means I'm decentering myself and my identities
Let's go.
in the right way so that you all can call me that. Yeah, that's great.
I love
Thank you.
that. I
Thank
love
you.
the word decentering, because even ourselves too, right? Like, we need a whole episode on that word.
Yeah, okay,
But
next one. That's round 2.
questions, unless you have anything to add, because impact is not just something you're like, give me the impact of this, or let me see if I can measure this. You have to design for it in the way you build your messaging and the way you set up like the day-to-day of your programs or whatever it is. And then, how to really protect and defend that using data, using what you know to be true about your community, because also we get sometimes stuck. Data and outcomes should absolutely strive to be quantitative, but I do believe there's power in the qualitative. It's just making sure you're collecting it right, and it's not just buzzwords and fluffiness. So my first question to you, since I gave a very standard definition, when you say impact, what's your definition, and how do you distinguish between activity, output, outcome, and impact?
Yes, wonderful place to start. So thank you. Because I agree. I think where I have watched a lot of my colleagues, peers, other organizations, other campuses over the years of my work, we all have these wonderfully aspirational goals to change the world in some way, shape, or form, right? Like we are impassioned and we are emboldened to go and serve others and somehow make a difference in the big wide world. And so it is possible to do that, but sometimes we kind of stumble around and fall forward in a way that kind of gets us to our goals. But we could shorten the amount of time and frustrations and iterations that we go through if we can just pause for a moment and actually use a logic model and kind of some basic steps to get what we actually think we can do, and then try a few things. So that's what I'm hoping I can help share with everyone who gets a chance to listen today, is what I've learned in the spaces I've been able to navigate by luck and by earning them, so that all of you can take some takeaways and put it immediately into action. So when I think about impact, I mean, that's the direct correlation for me to what we are trying to change, right? When we think about the people or the communities that we're trying to help, like what's the change that we think all of our efforts are going to go into to make happen? So for example, when I was on campuses, right, we were trying to increase graduation rates. It's just that simple, right? Like, students come to campus, they got to leave, and hopefully they've graduated, right? Like, so we're trying to increase graduation rates. Or maybe, I've been on a board where we're trying to reduce poverty in our community, right? That's the impact on the community that we're going to try and have. Or I did a little stint on a campaign. I won't mention, you can put two and two together. And we were just trying to increase voters, right? Just increase voting, right? So that's the impact. And so what we want to do, though, is see how some other pieces lead up to what we're trying to change about our communities or this world. And that's where those other vocabulary words that you just mentioned. So the activities that we do are the things, right, that we're actually putting our efforts into that we think are going to cause that change, the activities. The output of our activities is like direct result of those actions. So I'll use my program, for example, at the first campus I spent about 8 years on. We're trying to increase graduation rates. Great. We decided to build a program to support students to graduation. There you go. There's the activity, right? And the activity was the program. The output of my program was there were 30 students involved. We met every single Friday. So, counted up how many, sessions we had, right? These different components that created that activity. And that's how we knew we were actually doing something. So those are our outputs of our activities. The outcome then tells us what changed based on, right, the participants participating in those activities. So that might be things that, in my campus example, what do those students now know that they didn't know before? My intervention, my activity, or what can they do now that they've experienced my activity? So I built a program, 30 students, met every single week for, umpteen weeks. What do they now know because of the things that we did in those meetings? They know now how to navigate the campus environment. They know how now to study in a different way. They now know how to access, different social capital networks. They know and do things different, and that should lead to them progressing to graduation. So we want to look at the steps in our work in those broken down phases, so that when we look back after maybe a cycle of doing whatever our intervention or our practice is, we've got to look back and we get to say, did we actually get to our goal? And we want to go back to each of those individual spots to check to see, okay, well, did we output that we needed? If you build a program, right, maybe it's a lunchtime brown bag series for your employees so that they can talk about issues that are challenging them because you're trying to improve retention of employees. But if nobody shows up, well, then you just spent a lot of time not getting any output. So, right. So you need to adjust, right, what that particular issue was and try again. But each one of those steps in the process should be informing us where we're headed, why we're headed that way, and how we're going to get that goal that we're all aiming towards.
Something I want to highlight to everybody listening, because a lot of the people I work with, especially I think the past 2 years, they will say, ChatGPT, write me outcomes for this that I'm trying to do. And ChatGPT will give things that are not measurable, not attainable. I love this word, over-engineered. We
Yeah,
are allowed to stay to the basics. I love that you mentioned things like
absolutely.
attendance. Why are you trying to say that, like, we're going to measure the joy of the program of whatever that I do? It's really hard to measure joy. I'm not saying you can't try to do that, but maybe don't do it in your pilot. maybe don't do it in that first cycle. Like, stick to the basics in the beginning, like attendance, returning, how many people are returning after the first event. Like, stick to those basics and then add on based on what you learn.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because if you don't get some fundamentals correct and in the
Yeah.
right order, you're not going to hit that target, or you're going to hit a different target, and then you're kind of like, oh, well, wait a second. We solved this problem down here. Okay, well, that might be good, but then you got that, right. Then you like, have you got mission creep? Are you following through with what you were asked to do? And you
Right.
got, so that can lead to some existential crises. But if the pieces don't align, it is okay, because you can always just go back like to that iterative model and try again and try again. But yeah, knowing what your outputs of your activities is a very first step.
Mhm.
And then, finding that bridge to, well, if people do participate in what you've built, what should happen next so that you get to that end goal?
You cannot put together also these quantitative KPIs also without some baseline. Like understanding, like I think for me, like that's why it's like, okay, you could say we're gonna have 100 users, but your marketing list only has 5 emails. Like, how are you even gonna reach that? That's not realistic.
That would be a gigantic improvement. So yeah, later on, I think we'll probably come up with my 3 best recommendations if you're getting started, and it's very much going to be start with something that's bite-sized, but we'll get there. We'll get
Absolutely.
there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love
Yeah.
that you just mentioned really quickly. I love what you just said about, like being really intentional around the things that you decide to do and then how to apply that into something that you're actually doing. Because
Yeah.
then we tend to make up things to try to reach those, but they are not mission aligned. So your activities, your outcomes, all of them should match and you don't need 5 or 10 outcomes for one pilot program. Like people, you can pick 1 or 2 things that most really focus to do really good. And then
Yep.
you build on that for the
And you
rest.
build on that. It reminds me of some of the receipts that I was able to take away from the second campus
Yeah.
that I spent some time on.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about it because that's our next question about
Okay.
receipts. Well, it might be that, but tell us about inclusive leader interventions that you designed. What problem were you solving? What changes did you make? And what results did you measure over time?
Yeah, thank you for that very easy segue to the second campus. So on the first, I'm going to use an example here. On the first campus I was on, we were trying to improve retention rates of historically underrepresented students. But on the second campus I worked on for another about 8 years, we didn't have a retention issue, but we had a climate issue. And I don't mean that our offices weren't the temperatures that we really needed them to be. I literally mean that we were recruiting highly competitive students from historically underrepresented backgrounds and other very diverse backgrounds. The issue was that they were staying on our campus and they hated every minute of it. They were absolutely suffering in their experience. And that has larger implications for a really big named campus, right? Like if you have people graduating, yeah, they've got the diploma and they're moving on with their life, but you are missing the opportunity to leverage those networks, right? To get more of their people back into, right, our classrooms. You're missing the opportunity to leverage those individuals in alumni development. You're missing the opportunity to bring those individuals to the table when you need advisory boards, right? And boards of trustees and mentors and recruitment. It was more than just, were we getting people through our system? It was like, are they enjoying it? And they weren't. So when we came up with the inclusive leader interventions, it was one leg of part of an entire program strategy to improve the climate of our programs for our historically underrepresented populations and marginalized groups. I just want to keep it was broader than just like racial kind of underrepresented populations. We really were working towards other identities, socially constructed identities that were feeling marginalized in their experience. So the index we were trying to, the long-term index that I was aiming for to improve was what we call our student belonging index, right? Every 4 years, big campuses or even small campuses, and organizations can do this too. They'll do a climate study, right? It's a survey. Do you like being here? Do you feel welcome here? Do you feel like you have equal access to, resources? Have you made friends? Have you found, like, all those questions? And so that one particular set of the questions on our survey is what we were looking to improve, right? So, because we could see difference in how our different subsets of students answered those questions. So that was the long impact, right? We are aiming to improve the sense of belonging in our programs. Right, there you go. There's the impact. So to build backwards, what I was able to do is coordinate across all of the main structural components of our entire undergraduate programs office. So the advising team had some initiatives, the global teams had initiatives, our student engagement and clubs and organizations had initiatives, and then the career services wanted to do an initiative. And essentially, while students were participating in the bread and butter activities of the career services area, they were not feeling like they were welcomed, and they were not feeling like they could see themselves, and they weren't getting the mentoring and role modeling that they needed. So that built right there, that built the activities that I felt like we needed to do to be able to improve their sense of belonging in the career services experiences. So essentially, this one was really fun because I got the chance to really disrupt the ecosystem of what made that gigantic career fair and make it more inclusive and more representative of these marginalized identities. So, you wanted to know like what I looked at over the long run. So again, in the short term, after my interventions, immediately after, I always do a quick, I just call it a pulse survey, right? Like, I know my outputs, right? I know how many students I wanted to engage in my intervention. What we did is we added bookend experiences for students around the career fair. And then we invited companies that had great inclusive and diversity recruiting practices into those spaces. So it held on the students and kind of gave them anchoring. I won't get into details. If you want to see more about how this whole thing went down, I'll provide some links. We have a behind the scenes video and we have a marketing video of how this all went down. So if you're interested in how this worked, you can follow the links to those videos. So after the students participated in our bookend pieces to the career fair and got done with the career fair, we just sent out a quick survey. It was not 12 questions long. It was like 4 questions, right? Did you might find people that you could make connections? Did you see people who felt like, you could see yourselves in? Did you feel like you could bring your authentic self to the conversations that happened on the career fair? Really simple. And as I watched, to make sure that I was hitting marks, right, as strongly agree on at least those, that's my short-term kind of pulse. Well, thankfully, then the campus already did senior surveys that happened every year as people applied to graduate, and they were asked a subset of questions. And one of those questions happened to be is, how happy were you with and it listed all the different support services that they would have engaged with. So we watched, right, for those numbers to slowly change as the cohorts of students got closer and went through their graduation. I watched for that number to go up and change. And then in my long term, I had to wait 4 full academic cycles for the next climate survey to come around to see the longest term impact. And so then we were able to see a big jump in how students claimed, right, that they were feeling their sense of belonging before and after the interventions that we had implemented there for 8 years.
God, I'm just like, first of all, one of the hardest things is to actually listen to the data you receive. So many people will run reports and do surveys and do all that stuff, and then they end up doing something totally different. And to me, like, first of all, kudos to you for like recognizing. Like, I was just thinking about how sometimes people will be like, oh, people are not returning or coming to this event. Let's give free pizza. And all the students wanted was to feel represented. But like, do you know what I mean? Like let's offer free lunch to all our vouchers to like our marginalized communities. And all they wanted was to be seen, or maybe because you can ask, like, I even down the line, like, you could probably be like, you can make it, like, please at least bring, a diverse team to our recruitment fair. Like, you can ask those kinds of things, or, like,
Absolutely.
and like
Absolutely.
all they
That will have
wanted was for someone Hispanic, Asian, or just not white,
who
and then you're
looked or
asking,
sounded, or they didn't have to
yes,
code shift around.
my God,
That's the part of decentering myself as a leader and as a catalyst is that I have to listen for the clues and then put together, right, the clues that you're getting organically with the structures of the system. Put those two things together, and then try and present your opportunities. I agree. I can't even tell you how many committees and task force and dream teams I've been on where we went around and around and around and around as to which of these data points are we going to use. And so what it really does take at the end of the day is at some point, somebody in the group has just got to go, okay, enough. We are picking this one. We're going for it, because we can't spend every single day or every single hour of our days just trying to figure out what we're going to work on. At some point, you got to just suck it up, try something, and see where it takes you.
Yeah.
And right, can I just also mention really quick before we move on to the next question? I want to also put though into context, okay, that I was able to do a lot of the work I was doing in an environment where, and it had something a little bit to do with the external factors of the environment, a little bit to do with myself and where I found myself. But either by luck, right, or by my privilege, I was afforded a lot of room to fail. And so in this particular campus, we were in this huge growth mode. And so there was a lot of room to say, go ahead, Tayah, and try something. It's okay if it bombs miserably. I just want to mention that I'm very cognizant of the fact that there are others out there who don't feel like they have that liberty. And I've even watched my own colleagues and coworkers who maybe just because of my identity and the privilege that I hold, I was afforded a little bit more leniency, right? A little bit more room to get things wrong. And so I do want to mention that not everyone's able to take such a big amount of risk at the same time, which though goes full circle, then all the more reason why you really want to get your logic model very, very clearly kind of outlined. And so when you articulate it to everyone who's going to be engaged and collaborating, and I think what we probably want to talk about next is the difference between attributes to your work and then contributions to your work.
Yeah.
Right. But so if you're in a high risk environment, then slow down enough to think through your logic model, but don't slow down so much that you never try something. Fair?
Yeah. No, and mi gente, when you hear someone speak like hey, I just did, that is allyship. Being able to recognize that you're able to do that versus, I feel like in my position, I've never felt like I have to room to fail. I have like the whole immigrant community and my parents came for a bigger future on my shoulder whenever I do something, and it's so much harder. So just thank you so much for recognizing that. That is, I think that I didn't even think about it, but this is why I love having conversations with you because, and people who really understand, because I've called people out for their white privilege and they'd go immediately to the you insulted me. And I'm like, no, I don't have white privilege, but I have other privilege,
Yeah.
because honestly, I have the privilege of coming here with papers, that's not something, like there's so much behind that word and
There's
just
so
being
much.
able
Sounds like we
to,
just made podcast number 3.
yes, but thank you so much for recognizing that. And yeah, I want to talk about the next one. Let's talk about the next question of attribution versus contribution. No one
Yeah.
really owns the entire result, even though sometimes you just gotta make some decisions. But how do you make that strong case for impact while staying honest about the shared responsibility?
Well, I mean, clearly I'm trying to build on, one question to the next. So in my mind, when our model is solid and we know very clearly what we're aiming to impact, and we have built out, right, the activities we believe are going to do that, the outputs we expect due to our activities, the outcomes of our efforts, then all of those pieces are the attribution. We can attribute the impact to those steps. What will happen is that a lot of other constituents around us are going to see the vision and they're going to get excited and probably catch a little of the fire of your passion. And they're going to want to contribute, right? So, let's imagine again, I'm designing a program, right, that's going to provide these support services for students so that I can get higher graduation rates. Well, I might be able to do that program, in the basement, in the room that's easy to just like book and get done. But a alumni might come to me and say, well, Tayah, I'd really like to contribute to the success of your program. Would you like to use our corporate level space instead? So awesome. Great. Yeah, I would like to imagine a way to, take that contribution, thank you for contributing. Or someone will say, Tayah, it really seems like to improve on this experience, why don't I provide all the lunches for everybody? Oh, that would be great. Thank you. That is a contribution to this work. Would the work still happen? Could we get to our impacts without it? Probably. Do those contributions make our lives easier and happier and it's more fun, right? To have more people contributing? Yes, and we want to give those folks, acknowledgement, and we want to be very, very, grateful for those contributions. But here's where I have personally been challenged, and I wonder if anybody else feels this. Sometimes those contributions can begin to take over really what we're trying to get at, and we begin to get mission drift, right? And all of a sudden we're spending more energy managing the contributions, right, and everyone else trying to get in, and we kind of have to strip things back one more time. Like, no, this is what we are trying to accomplish. Even when it comes to a moment when someone says, here's what I'd like to contribute to your vision, and you're like, honestly, thank you, but that doesn't fit, right? That's not going to actually help me stay focused and on track and just laser aimed at what we're trying to impact. But here is what would help, right? Like, thank you. That's a really cool idea or really generous offer. I can't necessarily use that, but here's a way that we could pivot and we could use that contribution in aims, to our goal. So again, it really does go back to really understanding that really refined process. And it doesn't have to come out of your brain again in the first try, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I did these programs. One thing that's different about me than my counterparts who were DEI strategists in higher ed is that I stayed in my roles, for 8 years each. It was enough so I could see 2 full, cohorts of
Yeah.
students to graduate. And that is, gave me a lot of perspective and a lot of opportunity to do iterations over and over and over again,
Yeah.
and really kind of perfect what we were doing. And so, that's also, I think, the last thing before we kind of talk about what other people can take away from this conversation is sometimes you do have to put more time on the calendar. Think about how long you think you're actually going to be going for these impacts, right? A lot of times these aren't things that are going to get done in 1 or 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah, let's go ahead. I'd love to end with what are the 3 things that I think, you would give people to do this, and then yeah, go
Yeah,
for it.
absolutely. I mean, even myself, I find myself in a spot where I'm kind of transitioning in my career away from higher ed because it just got to a point where too much of my core work had been eliminated. And I just didn't see myself. And we can come back to that if you're interested in knowing. But I couldn't fit into the organization anymore, just the way the politics had gotten on the campus. I'm even going to take these 3 pieces of advice myself when I find my next place to land, my next team to join. So the first, if you're beginning to draft designs, from scratch, you got to find the tangible first. I know, again, go back to the beginning of our conversation, we all have these extremely high hopes that we are going to change really big structural things about our societies and our communities. And I know we want to get there, but we can only impact what we can touch. So find first what is tangible, right? If you're really concerned about poverty, then you're going to need to find a way to actually work with families who are experiencing that circumstance. So find first what's tangible. So sometimes it means kind of pulling back the vision a little bit, pull it back to something that you can actually design programs and activities to touch. So if you can touch it, you can impact it, right? Then second, you've heard me say this 6 times already, document your model. Even if it's just a draft and you document it and you have to go back and rework it, it's fine. And the model really is, if we do this, and you fill in your blank with your activity, then this will happen. You fill in the next part was what you think that outcome's going to be. So that, and then you fill in your blank, and that's what you're trying to impact, right? If we do blank, then blank will happen so that we get our outcome. Draft that, test it out, all your stakeholders, everyone you can share it with, see how they respond. And then third piece of advice, do a bite-sized sample, right? We do not want to sit down and try and eat the whole hog. All right? Like, let's do a quick pilot, test out what you learn, right? Do one luncheon, see what people say, then build on it. You were mentioning this earlier, right? We do not have to have everything figured out perfectly to try a run, right? And see what we learn from that. Adjust our language and our logic, try it again. If you begin to get the impact you were hoping, keep replicating. Don't mess with your model. Keep doing it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm so surprised when young directors come to me and ask for informational interviews and some advice and say, well, I did this and this and this and this and this. And I'm like, whoa. When are you going to just let something that works, let it work, let it
Yeah.
ride, let it go. You can build on it, you can expand on it, but like take your wins. Take your wins when you
Yes. Oh,
can.
I
Take
love
your
that.
wins. Don't change it if and if you're getting bored, fine. Hire an assistant director, let them run it, but have them run it, the same way. Anyways, I'm off topic, but
I loved
I
it. It was great. Yeah. No, Taya, this was amazing. I think, we definitely need to have a follow-up. I guess, there's so much we can discuss around being able to apply this in organizations or wherever you are. But as a leader, it's really important that you take the time to look out of all of the things we just talked about because it applies across anything that you do, not just programs, but the way you run your team. Like, the way you run like this applies in HR, this applies in anything that you do around whenever, especially when you want to make things better. Impact is not a slogan, it's design, data, and discipline. And today you reminded us that the long game is measurable, strategy is teachable, and receipts matter. We'll definitely add the links to the things that you mentioned so we can get to know a little bit more about you. And then, subscribe to our newsletter and to our podcast to hear more. Hopefully, I'm going to have you on again. I think there's so much more to unpack for our listeners, but this was a great conversation, Taya. Thank you so much.
thank you so much. Fue un placer.
Gracias.
Don't forget to subscribe as well as like this on all of our social media. You can find us on Instagram at Palante Nonprofits and on our website at www.palantenonprofits.com. Gracias.